You are listening to 94.7 KPIP. I'm Rachel Steele with another Local Voices interview. Today we're at the Ashby-Hodge Gallery of American Art talking about their new show of works by the late Vincent Campanella. And we are fortunate to have with us today Campanella's daughter, Tura Campanella-Cook. Thank you for being with us today, Tura.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I have to ask, Tura is not a very common name. Where did your parents get that name from, and what does it mean?
They were inspired by an excellent classical pianist named Artur Schnabel. He had passed away shortly before my birth. They were thinking of naming me a name that began with T for various other reasons. And my mother took Artur and turned it into Tura.
I think that is a beautiful transformation and very unique. Now, as I understand it, your father was classified as a classical abstractionist. I don't know what that is. Can you explain what that term means?
I first heard the term after his death when a retrospective show of his work was being planned for the Albrecht Kemper Museum in St. Joe, Missouri. And the art historian Henry Adams was writing the catalog about my father, and he said his work is classical abstractionism. And so I learned during this period of preparation for the show what that term meant. It has to do with the timeline of abstractionism.
Now, your father studied art in college, correct?
No, he studied art, a community-based art school in Manhattan called the Leonardo da Vinci Art School. And it was founded by Italian immigrants who wanted to preserve Italian culture and art. And it was really for adults after work to come and study. But my father was very precocious in art, and his father brought him to the school and asked if he could be enrolled when he was 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so he went to school like an ordinary child and came to the school at night and studied art at the Leonardo da Vinci Art School.
At age 9, he started.
Right, and he was there through his high school years. After high school, it was the Depression, and he went out into the painting world. He did not go to college until he was an adult raising a family many years later.
Right. And he took this classical Renaissance training that was given by the Leonardo da Vinci Art School to the streets of New York and beyond. He was actually a member of the WPA in the 30s. Do you have any knowledge of what pieces that he did for the WPA?
Well, I think strictly speaking, what he painted during the WPA belonged to the WPA. And he was what was called an easel artist. You also had muralists, and there are wonderful WPA murals now on post offices and banks and things. The easel paintings went somewhere, and so he does not own those, and I never knew them growing up in the 50s and 60s.
So, but they are a property, basically, of the American government,
the American people. They are, and he was just thrilled to be a part of that, partly because, it was an employment program and he needed work.
Everybody needed work.
Yes, he loved, as a young artist, to go out to a new part of the country, in his case, Wyoming, and teach art and meet people and contribute to the artistic expression of the community.
Among other places besides Wyoming, your father taught at Park University, correct? Where is that, and how many years did your father teach there?
It was Park College at the time. It was, smaller. He was there from 53 to 80. Before that, he was at the Kansas City Art Institute, which was his move to the Midwest.
And where is Park University?
Parkville, Missouri is about 10 miles, 20 miles northwest of Kansas City, Missouri.
So he didn't have to go very far. He was in Kansas City, and then he went to teach at Park University.
Yes.
So he was there 28 years or so. Do you have any memories of your father at Park University?
Oh, yes. The art building had, I think, the music department on the first floor and maybe theater, and art and the art studios were on the top floor. and it was staircase.
Oh my goodness.
And, I would go there sometimes on weekends, and it had a great, 360-degree view of the river and the countryside, and it smelled of paint. And it was, his teaching home for many years.
And rumor has it that one of your experiences while your father was teaching was that you got to meet Thomas Hart Benton, a Missouri native. When and where did you meet him, and what did he say?
I was a child. Tom and Rita Benton lived probably less than a mile from us in Kansas City. There was a beautiful area called Roanoke Park with Carnes Boulevard coming down into it. And we were up on like this parallel driveway of Carnes Boulevard. And they were through the park, up a really twisty, steep road, either on Valentine Road or a road that was going to intersect Valentine, in a beautiful old house. And we were guests for dinner. And I remember actually Rita Benton more than Tom, and she greeted my mother, and she let me play with a doll that belonged to her daughter. So that's my memory. I was 4 or 5, and I can't think why my brother was with a babysitter, but I don't, he's not in the picture of my memory. I think I met Benton years later when the Truman Museum mural painted by Benton was being opened. Early 60s, maybe. I'm not sure when it was, but I think I actually got out of school to go with my dad to that opening and see the murals and see, the famous artist.
Did he make an impression on you?
I just remember his work, I remember his house, and I remember all the stories from my father.
Well, you were very young. You
Yes.
were very young. Now, I understand, and looking around, I can see what they're talking about, that your father had his own color scheme, as they called it. How would you describe this unique color scheme of your father's?
Well, what comes to mind is what he said about his color scheme later in life. He said, I don't think people like my paintings too much because they're very morose. Grays and blues and, dulled out yellows, the occasional red or pink. And I remember asking him once, for a painting to take to my new home. And I said, I want something with red in it. And he goes, to look for something with red. I don't know, he was painting from nature, and he was seeing industrial landscapes or town landscapes or trees or nature, whatever, and they were muted colors.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, they were muted colors, and they were cool colors.
Yes, fall colors.
Yes.
And the one thing that I do notice is, yes, there is that color scheme, but he has found a way to make brown pop. In each of these photos that I'm looking at, I see, there's a little bit of pink in there. And it does have that muted quality to it. But he finds a way to make something pop in each one. And I think that's wonderful.
That was a part of his teaching as well. There was a period when he would give his art students very sort of plain, almost like wrapping paper to work on, and he gave them black and white and maybe some kind of ochre or earth color, and he said, this is what you're going to paint with, and you're going to express, different shades and tones from these colors.
Mm-hmm. Many say that your father and his work, they were representative of what was happening in the American art world in the 30s and the 40s. Do you agree with that? And how did he do that, in your opinion?
The paintings that I know by him, that I either grew up with or found, tucked away in the house after he died, were mostly from the 30s and 40s. That by the time I was a small child, painting production had really slowed. I remember the Maine watercolors, from our summers in Maine. I didn't know really the rest of the art world. I just knew my father's work, if you really want to know the truth. Years later, I'm looking at galleries and museums that are showing work of his contemporaries and his period, and I'm feeling comfortable seeing certain designs in certain settings because they were also what he did. But that's a very interesting question. I don't presume to know really very much at a technical or historical level about my father's art. He was my father, you know. I think if I did anything over, I would have taken one of his art classes when I was in high school or college. I think it would have done me a lot of good.
Well, you know, it might have brought out some natural talent that you didn't know you had.
Maybe. He did believe that anybody could draw. No, he didn't take when somebody said, "Oh, I can't draw." You know, that wasn't the answer you gave my father.
Yes, I can imagine, just by looking at what the works that we have here today at the Ashby-Hodge Gallery of American Art. And your father's works have been displayed all over. Do you know any of the other places that he has had shows at?
He was more widely exhibited in the 40s than he is now. He had some works at big name New York and East Coast universities, as well as West Coast and Denver and places. And as sort of the popularity of different styles changes, museums either store the works or they do what's called deaccessioning, and they let them go. So the Newark Museum has a painting that I've seen in storage but not exhibited. The Albrecht Kemper Museum in St. Joseph, Missouri has 3 paintings, some that were in our show in 2007, but I'm not sure if they're on the walls right now. There is a museum in Rock Springs, Wyoming, where he had his WPA experience, and it's a community art center, and there is a painting permanently up there.
Well, that sounds like he is all over the country.
Yes, in small ways.
In small ways. And sometimes that's all we can hope for.
True, and I am very grateful for this opportunity at the Ashby-Hodge to show, 20-some paintings in a wonderful display, and I hope people will come see it.
Well, I have one last question for you. Is there anything you'd like visitors and our listeners to know about your father or his work, the late Vincent Campanella, and this show?
The paintings range from, I'd say, the 1960s to, the 1930s to the 1960s. You can see how his style has changed, and you can see the things that interested him. He has portraits of not only models, but his wife, and a self-portrait, and he has street scenes and great nature scenes.
Well, it's all beautiful work, and I am so happy that we got to talk to you, Tura.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And make sure you head down here to the Ashby-Hodge Gallery of American Art and take in the new show works by the late Vincent Campanella. Ashby-Hodge Gallery of American Art is located in Classic Hall on the CMU campus. It is free, open to the public, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 1:30 to 4:30 p.m. And come take a look at this show. It is amazing. For more details on this and a video, log on to our Facebook page at KPIP-LP Fayette. And for 94.7 KPIP's Local Voices,